the local organizing committee has changed the test threshold for COVID-19 tests, for PCR tests. Now, I'm not a technician on these tests. The measure they use is the cycle threshold value. Before the cycle threshold value, it was 40, and I don't know how big the scale is, so I can't quite quantify 40, but the important number is now that it is 35. So what dropping it from 40 to 35 means is that more people who have like negligible amounts of the virus in their body because they had COVID-19 before will continue testing negative, because what was happening before is, like, on the standards that we accept here in everyday life in Canada, you might score 38 or whatever it is, and that counts as a negative test because they recognize that that's not really the virus being active in your body. But then if you try to go to Beijing, your 38 gets you booted. Now the 35 gets you through the door. Dave Zirin, what are the implications of dropping this threshold in terms of negative tests for the Olympics?
Well, the implications are twofold. I mean, first, it probably will mean that more athletes get to compete. And I think, if you're going, we've had this discussion with other subjects. If you're going to do it, then you might as well do it. And you might as well do it in a way that actually gets the people who've been training to do it to Beijing to perform. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, Beijing is taking a big risk because the COVID rates are low in Beijing. They're having an outbreak right now in Beijing that actually, ironically, they've traced to a Canadian package.
Right. Yes, they said it came in the mail.
Came in the mail.
I'm not sure.
I don't know what to believe.
Color me skeptical, but go ahead.
I don't know what to believe. I don't know if it's true that the great outbreak involves 9 people. And they're very upset about 9 people. 9 people is a fraction of my daughter's high school in terms of who's getting sent home every day for COVID, and particularly Omicron variant. So it's like, I don't know what to believe or what not to believe in that regard. I do know that if they're wary about Canadian packages, they're about to get the mother load coming in with the Beijing Olympics in all kinds of human form too. So, I mean, I think it's like you lower the rate so more people can compete. Terrific. Beijing is also doing what Tokyo did, and that's rolling the dice that they're not going to be that the Olympic legacy is not going to involve mass hospitalization.
Yeah, well, listen, I will give them, like the local organizing committee, I will give them credit, because when I started thinking about the effect COVID-19 tests would have on this games, my mind went to the worst place of straight-faced, bad faith crookedness, where you look at events where, like, the home team is on the cusp of the podium, but not quite. And then all of a sudden, all the top 3 contenders, sorry, buddy, positive, go home. Oh, look, home team, gold medal. What a coincidence. That was the place where I went. And I really thought that they were going to start using COVID-19 tests as a reason to keep people out in order to puff up the home team's medal count. So I will give them credit for actually trying to create more of an open level playing field. Megan McPeak, because you've discussed this before, like how easy it is to test positive like weeks after you've had the virus and are no longer infectious, no longer sick, but because you have some of the debris floating around your system, you might trip the positive test. Now, so this changed threshold, what do you think that's going to mean for the games?
I think Dave's right in the sense that it allows more athletes to compete that might not have been able to meet that threshold of 40 prior to it being changed down to 35. But at the same time, like, what does that mean? Like, does that mean that you're no longer going to have to be stuck in like that 21-day quarantine potentially if you get over there after this testing phase to get to Beijing? Because let's say you go through this testing phase and your test before you leave come back negative, everything's good to go, you've met the threshold, then you land and you test positive. What does that mean? What does the quarantine look like? How, like, does this threshold now allow you to avoid being in a 21-day quarantine and completely missing the games? Does this threshold being lower to 35 allow you that if you do test positive, you can only isolate for a certain amount of time and then return as long as your test results after that are 35 or under, so that you continue to meet that threshold? That's my concern, is people who get there and then test positive. What does that look like for them, especially the athletes who might get there and have to compete a couple days later, because we don't know what their situation looks like right now leading up to leaving for Beijing. Are they going, purposely with enough time that if they land and test positive, they have a week between their first event and them landing, that they can quarantine for enough time to be able to retest and compete? Like, what are we doing? We don't know what the testing process looks like once you physically are in Beijing. And let's say you test positive during like competition. You're in, I don't know, the second round of snowboarding, trying to get to the podium, and you're currently in fourth place trying to fight to get into, the podium. And all of a sudden it's the morning of competition and you test positive. What does that look like?
Yeah. From a communication standpoint, the one thing we could all benefit from, which nobody with the power seems to want to give us, is a scale.
A straight answer?
Or just a scale. Like, what do these different values mean? Like, give me a denominator. 35 out of what? 40 out of what? What's the denominator? Okay, if we're talking about a 100-point scale, show me that, and then show me what these different values, what typically happens. What is typically happen? Like, what value on this scale does someone typically register when they are like infectious? What value do they typically register when they're just feeling really crappy? And then we can see what a 35 or a 40 means. So if an 80 means that I'm shedding virus, I'm sick, I'm making other people sick, that means one thing. But then if you tell me that 35 and 40 means literally we've never seen anyone with a 35 or a 40 infect anyone else, we've never seen anyone with a 35 or a 40 even sniffle, then we know what that means. But right now, these are just numbers, and the people putting these numbers out, and then also we in the mainstream media are very, 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 very bad at contextualizing these things. So the numbers sort of mean something, and they sort of give us some clarity, but they wind up raising more questions than they answer because they don't have context. Dave, you're going to say something.
No. Just that how much I agree with what you're saying here. It's like there's so much that we don't know in terms of how this is going to be processed. And let's say it, there's a real lack of trust. And it's the lack of trust is not just with Beijing and the Chinese government, it's with the IOC as well. So being able to compute what actually will constitute a safe Winter Olympics and make things safe, not just for the athletes, but for the people of Beijing, it becomes very, very difficult to decipher.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Because again, if I'm just a person from Beijing who gets a job working at the Olympics, like I signed up for this job, I did not sign up to risk my life, risk my health, risk my family's health. So it would help everyone, to have like concrete information. What are these ranges? What value does somebody give off on these tests when they're sick? What value do they give off when they are infectious? But we still don't know that. So stay tuned. Maybe in the next couple of weeks, we might get some context. Maybe not. We might still be flying blind.